much like what the senior center does. They could apply for this as a one-time event and be able to hold a large option there. The other would be a small project, and that would be up to $2,000 for a small project. And again, all these numbers, if you look at it and you say we want to do a smaller amount for more organizations, then we can reduce that $2,000 down to $1,000, and we could expand it so that more people had an opportunity. When we were looking at it, we were thinking that maybe $2,000 would allow an organization really to do more with that one organization. Our categories that we listed was ensuring that their project targeted youth, families, seniors, homeless individuals. So if there's a group that has a pantry, that they wanted to maybe do something different with on how they're getting food out to the community, then they could apply. Eligibility was pretty open, just organizations must serve a public good within the city of Auburn. If you have an organization that's doing a public good, then they could apply for it. They must be connected to one of the categories, and like I mentioned, they must attend a pre-application workshop. The selection process would be pretty simple. They'd have to complete the application that we would make available, their budget. We would be part of a grant review process that we would hold. We would pull, again, different individuals that would participate in that. They'd have a closeout reporting to ensure we're getting the feedback on what their award, what they were able to accomplish with their funding. Submit a short report with the receipts, and then they would participate in a project showcase event. That would be something that we would host so that you knew what the $10,000 did in the community, how they were able to leverage that. Again, we're talking about projects that are focused on a collaborative effort, they're resourceful, innovative, focused on a community approach that's effective, equitable, and sustainable within what we have currently, and be able to build on that. Again, this is one option for you to consider. Maybe you have some suggestions, changes to what we're proposing here, or maybe as a council, you've given this some thought and you have an entirely different track that you'd like to go with at 10,000, but this is a line item that's sitting there. We want to make sure we present it to you as how would you like to spend it?
Thank you very much. And just if I could just get, before we go into questions and whatnot, from the council, is this something that makes sense that you want to pursue? If so, then we can spend a little bit of time looking at tweaking or answering some questions, but I don't want to waste anyone's time if this is not in the direction that you all want to travel in. Is it generally in the direction, micro grant, small? Okay, we're all in agreement? Okay. Open up. Any questions to Mr. Kroll? We'll start on the end. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for bringing this forward, but I'd like a little bit more information. How did you come up with this, or did you talk with our Human Services or CDBG, Zach, to try to figure out what would be the best way to set this up? Or did you talk to any of the different churches or agencies in Auburn or school that are, or even the PAL Center that are dealing with feeding the hungry and trying to have money to get the supplies and food they need?
So the concept here of micro grants, I did some research on micro grants and found some communities that are doing micro grants for other, not just feeding, not just for food insecurity, but they're providing micro grants for a full array of different initiatives that they want to begin in their community. I think that this could potentially be a good model moving forward. The council's priority this year was the $10,000 towards Feeding Auburn. Maybe in the future you would have other funds that you would want to apply to community respect. And you could have organizations that could apply for funds along the same lines. So the micro grant concept came from just seeing what other communities were doing for micro grants. I didn't find any that were doing something specifically in this area. As far as reaching out to Zach, feel that Zach certainly has CDBG funding that is really along those guidelines. Did not get the feedback from him or from general assistance rather, because that's, again, they wouldn't necessarily apply. I did reach out to one organization just to get some feedback, and I haven't heard back from her, but but I was reaching out to that individual because I wanted to talk more about that sustainability and training, what that would look like. Pulling somebody in that's in that field and doing that work, I think would be beneficial to have somebody come in and as part of that pre-application workshop,
I'm sorry.
provide that information.
Phil, I'm gonna ask if I could interrupt. I'm sorry about that. I'd like to just call about a 10-minute break right now. Okay? So we're gonna just recess. There's something that's come up that we want to address here in the building, and we'll reconvene in probably 10 to 15 minutes. Okay? Thank you so much, and just hold tight on that. summarize that real quick when we go live? Okay, very good. We're out of recess. Just like to tell everybody at home, we just did a break because we had the smell of gas, and there was actually a gas spill, which is now being remedied right now over on Mechanics Row, which got into our ventilation system, which caused everyone to err on the side of caution. So thank you, everybody who's watching, for that momentary pause. We're going to pick back up with Mr. Kroll, if you would, continue on our Feeding Auburn microgrant program.
So to follow up on Councilor Gary, any organization, Senior Center, Pal Center, Boys and Girls Club, any group that's doing good in Auburn that would like to apply, they could apply.
Councilor, we'll just keep going down the order. I think
Okay.
everybody had questions, Councilor? Listen.
Quickly, I think one, language is important, and I think to think about, instead of fighting food insecurity and eliminating food insecurity, addressing it, because there are a lot of organizations that have been working for a long time on this issue, and I sort of respecting that work. Who would make the decision about who gets the grants?
So we would have a panel, and whoever you would like to have on that panel, we could have some council representation, staff, so it would really be up to you.
Okay, so that we would decide what the makeup would be. Can for-profit organizations apply for this funding, and can individuals?
It would be up to, we could make that as part of the requirement. So if you would like to just restrict it to nonprofit, the concern with nonprofit is you have some organizations that maybe they don't have a nonprofit, but they are doing good in the community.
Yeah, I agree, and even for-profit
right.
organizations or individuals, so to open
And they
it
could
up.
potentially leverage some of their own dollars to
Yeah,
that, so.
I think that's a great idea. And lastly, I think the idea, and you address it, about sustainability is really important, and to make sure that that's a part of when helping them, training them, giving them information beforehand, and making sure that sustainability of, especially the projects, is in there. Thank you.
Just to address, before going to Councilor Walker, the makeup of the committee I have as an outstanding item. Okay, so I'm just going to put a footnote on that, and we can address that once everybody has their questions answered. Okay? Councilor?
I guess it was somewhat addressed by Holly that it'd be good to use some of these monies to be sure that we sustain some organizations that are already making this effort, and that we maybe don't really endeavor to make startups that would actually compete with organizations that are already doing a good job. One in particular that I'd like to highlight, the High Street Pantry, which now works with Hannaford as well as Good Shepherd. We're serving every Thursday morning 60 parties, and those parties can come once a month, so we're serving 240 parties during a month. So I'm sure that's one organization that will probably be able to benefit from
Right.
this.
Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. One of them that caught my eye was the closeout reporting. Submit a short report and receipts, which I think is very vital to this board to be able to see the results. Don't necessarily have to see receipts, but a result of what was done with the money and how it was used, and what, the number of people that was served. And then the other thing I would think is very important for me is to make sure the process is made very public as to what the process is, who to contact, and what the priorities are, and how people would, organizations were chosen, so that there's nobody wondering, if there's, because I think that's really important with any program like this, is to make sure that people know how to apply and then what the process is clearly, and then the selection. So, but I think it's a good thing so far.
Okay. Any other questions on this side? Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You had mentioned the grand amount last time, I recall, because these are small projects of 2,000 and one-time events of 500. So those are individual ones within a larger amount of money?
So you appropriated $10,000?
Right.
So the committee that makes the determination could say, we want to make sure that we approve for small projects and a couple of small one-time.
And I know, this must be part of the research you're going to do, but there are, as previous councils have said, there are profits, for-profit and nonprofits as well, organizations around here, but there are a lot of individuals who don't go to those places and they still have food insecurity. And I would suggest seeking out teachers, people who work with these students, especially if you're working with students, then you're working with families, to find out which ones come to school without food to eat, because there are a lot of them. And I would like to see us go that route.
Councilor Walker?
I think the only thing that I would suggest is the 500 to 2,000, there should be the numbers in between, whatever someone feels they would need, whether it's $1,000, $1,500, not exceed the two.
So I should update, it should say up to 500 and then up to 2,000.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see.
Yep.
Councilor Young?
It's nice to have compassion, to feed people that are poor and needy and such, but I would hope that someday, out of this whole thing, that we'd be able to, instead of just giving them a fish, teach them how to fish, or, the work, or address the problem why they're in that situation that they're in. But, it's nice to have compassion. I guess that's the first step.
Yeah, and if I could follow up with that, when this kind of, the genesis, not the micro grant, but the $10,000 towards jumpstarting was kind of twofold. I remember talking to a few counselors about this, and Councilor Walker as well, as he introduced it, was A, to help end it, and again, operative word is help, and the best way you do that is by encouraging people to find the resources on their own or being self-sufficient. The second one was to really highlight the health and nutrition aspect, and really give people a chance through a very easy application process, some sort of grant that they normally wouldn't be able to get, i.e. through a community development block grant or some other nonprofit. And I mean, just recently being involved with the city applying for a grant at the state level was hair pulling, to say the least. So we want to avoid those. In order, there's questions, I think, and I'm going to propose two potential solutions, and let's discuss them. One is the committee, in order to gauge who's going to be responsible for, or who's going to get the grants. This is a 150th project for our sesquicentennial. So one option is for the sesquicentennial executive committee that meets regularly and publicly to look and review the applications and then award based upon the criteria set forth here. The second one is to have the current Community Development Block Grant Committee, who has been, legacy-wise, reviewing grants previously, be the determining factor in this. I would suggest that the easiest thing to do is to either select one of those two committees to be the adjudicating committee. Thoughts? Councilor Zania?
I think it would be nice to include somebody who has experience in this area. And I respect the work that the 150th and the CDBG committee does, but whether one or two people who have experience are included in those groups, I think that would be important.
I wouldn't necessarily say no, but I would say that probably inclusion into the group might exclude them from participating in the grants themselves.
I think that's fine if people know.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
that's
I just
part
want to make it sure that the people who aren't deciding are also
Oh,
applying.
yeah. No, I think that's.
So,
a
and
good
that's,
policy.
trying to keep that separate. Any other comments on that, or suggestions, or just up or down, the CDBG committee, or the 150th committee, or something else?
Well, I think CBG committees have been working longer and harder, and they know some of the agencies that may come forward, or they may know of some that haven't come forward that would like to. But I would also suggest that Holly or her designee from our Human Services Committee have somebody on there, because she too deals with the people that need food on almost a daily basis.
And remember, one of the other goals here was to get out of the ecosystem that currently exists and to do something different and involve partners that normally wouldn't be involved and that are doing this professionally, just to try someone else's hands and give them the ability to help their neighborhoods that normally wouldn't. So, there's kind of a, if you would, a breaking of that same kind of what's been going on, the same old same old, not to say it's bad, but just different. Any other comments? Do we want to, anybody? I'd just like to get a general consensus, because I think this should be coming in front of the council, fully vetted out, either on the 16th or maybe on the next meeting thereafter, so we can do a resolve. But I want to give Phil and this team as much guidance as possible. So CDBG, guys think that's great? 150th, what do you think, without going to a vote? Bob?
I think I'd go towards a CDBG personnel, again, if we're looking for continuity, thinking this might be something that'll continue into another year, and I think as Assistant Manager suggesting that this might be the first such micro granting type program. Other areas could be looked at in the future. So I think if we can connect it to some existing and ongoing groups, I think would be important.
I like the idea of that, in that, you know, grants do originate from that particular committee, and I think people who have been working with grants are accustomed to doing that. They're accustomed with the organizations that they're working with. But I would also like to reiterate that I think that we would need to have, you know, Holly, as Councilor Gary said, Holly from the office would be a good person to have on there. Plus, I would really like to see a school nurse type, someone from the school system, because they see children coming into school without food. I've seen them at ski meets. They don't bring any food because they don't have any food, and they're there all day into the evening. So we need to represent a certain group of students who have no control over their own food.
Okay. I think that maybe CDBG, but on this situation, maybe amended to include one representative from one of the four basic, or the four target areas in this. That way, they're not consistent year after year in case it changes.
Just to follow up with Alfredo, I think the school lunch program actually would be a person out of that program could be identifying those families that seem to need help.
There's some people, they've had some training, and there's some people that we've talked with. Okay, so if we give Phil some guidance, I think that's, I mean, let's talk about CDBG as a core, everybody agree? Plus amended for this situation with at least 4 members that can represent some of the targeted audiences, homelessness, seniors, youth, and families. Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay, we'll have this all drafted up and, you know, probably ask individually if there's any other clarification, but I think we got enough information. Thank you. And then once this is done, folks, we really got to talk about this out in the community. We have to get it out there so people know about it. It's the only way it's going to be successful. Next, we have council initiatives with our city manager, Mr. Crichton.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. As you know, we have been producing on a regular basis a report called City Council Initiatives. We've been doing that since shortly after I became city manager, with the support of the departments and the work that has been done by my office with the executive assistant, Jody DeRisco. We have been providing this report, and it had been requested that we do a workshop on it. So I'm going to go through a few highlights. The report itself is 15 pages long with a lot of details in it. I won't attempt to do that tonight. I think this is a report that the community will be interested in, and we're looking at putting this on the website in the future so that the community will be able to have access to it, put it on the city council page. This particular report was produced in August, the end of August, August 26. It's an update from the Economic Community Development Office, Fire Department, Public Works, and Rec and Sports Tourism Department. I'm going to start with this particular slide, which shows the construction activity that we had this past year, almost $47 million worth, and you can see how that compares to previous years. We've had a lot of activity going on in the community, as you know. This is important information for the community to know, and my thanks to Michael Chamings and the folks in the Economic Community Development Office for keeping up with this, and the folks who are involved in the assessing department or assessing office as well. There's been a lot going on in terms of permits and in construction, and we hope that that's going to continue. The economic community development activities are numerous. What I'm showing here is just one aspect of what's in the report. There are a few pages that have to do with Economic Community Development Department. The rail study funding, the passenger rail study has been completed. I've asked former Councilor Bob Stone, who's a member of that committee, to provide a report to the council. He's working on that, and I think this is something that we should have a discussion about. Tastemaker program, this is a program that the Economic Community Development Office has been working on with individuals that are interested in food and beverage production business. And St. Louis Church sale, as you know, St. Louis Church is a prominent part of the history of the city of Auburn. Right now, we're trying to work with an individual who's interested in purchasing St. Louis Church, and we're continuing to do that. Solar energy projects, this is a more recent activity. We have a number of entities that are interested in doing work with the city and also interested in having their own private projects. Due to legislation that was passed at the last session of the Maine State Legislature, has become much more attractive and appealing to do that. So we're now working on that. We'll be reporting on that more in the future. Great Falls Community School, that's really the Great Falls CLT that we are trying to work with, and we've got a number of things that are happening with the Great Falls Community Live Theater. We are hopefully going to be having a meeting with the board. Myself and members of the board are going to sit down and have a conversation about what their plans are, what they're thinking of doing, and I think they provide important events and programming with what they do, with the plays and so forth that they have, and we want to work closely with them to try and be more successful. South Auburn Foreign Investment Area, that's Prospect Hill Golf Course area. There are two houses that are being built there now. I think they're near completion if they're not completed, Michael. And there's activity going on there as well with the gentleman who owns that course. Unfortunately, the course was not operated this summer, but the gentleman who owns the course, Mr. Wang, is very interested in working with the city, and we're continuing those discussions. There are a number of other activities that we have going on with the Economic Community Development Office that's included in the report, and I'm very pleased with the quality of the staff that we have with the city across the board. The Economic Community Development Office is doing a lot of work on a number of different activities. The next slide is a demonstration of some of the technical ability that we have in terms of dashboards. I know it's hard to read. This is a slide that we have that's helping us to track what's happening regarding the marijuana license applications. We are trying to take advantage of the GIS information and abilities that we have. You'll look at the slide to the picture to the far right. It's showing some of the spots where the marijuana applications have been received. Then if you go to, bless you, if you go to the top left, you'll see the locations for businesses that existed prior to December 13, 2018, are grandfathered and those that are not grandfathered. And then you have another slide which shows a number of marijuana stores and facilities and the cultivation facilities. So we're trying to use data increasingly in terms of decision-making that we are doing as a city, and trying to bring that information to the council so you can make important decisions. At this point, I think we've had, is it 46 applications received, Phil? Roughly, and we're going through that process. It's a very intensive process involving the city clerk's office and the police department and a number of individuals from city staff who are working on that, including the Economic Community Development Office as well. This is a slide that shows the number of calls that we've had over a 2-month period from June 1st, 2019 to July 31st of 2019. Again, this indicates the activity and the service levels that the fire department's providing in terms of types of calls that we're receiving. This is the kind of information that helps us as a city to understand what's happening in the community, provides useful information to the council. The next slide is a slide from the Public Works Department, which summarizes what's happening in terms of reconstruction projects in the community, as well as reclamation projects. We are finishing the season at this point, although we hope that good weather continues. And the Public Works Department does I think, really good job in terms of what they're doing. And this is a summary of the projects that have taken place this summer, some of which have been contracted out. Currently in design are Academy High Elm Main Streets intersection, Main Mill Broad Streets intersection, Hotel Road reconstruction, Library Avenue reconstruction, traffic signal upgrades, Turner Street sidewalk. The next slide is from the Recreation and Sports Tourism Department. This department is very busy, like our departments are as a whole. The structure for this department is Phil Kroll, as the Assistant City Manager, oversees what's happening with Recreation and Sports Tourism Department, is doing a very good job working with Mark Goslin, who's the person who's in charge of recreation and sports tourism, and the other folks that are involved have a number of activities that they've been undertaking. You can see from the Chestnut Field renovation project to what's happening with the Norway Savings Bank Arena. And that's the last slide, I believe. Again, the report is it's part of the packet that was sent out for this meeting, and we will be putting this information on the website as we move forward in the future so that the public can see the information that you get on a regular basis. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager. I appreciate that. Council, do we have any questions on this, or just in general, I should say? It's the first workshop of its kind on this topic. Councilor Azaña?
Mr. City Manager, this is an extremely helpful and illustrative document that you have here. And I find when I get it, that it's helpful, and I took a copy of it to the West Auburn Neighborhood Watch, and they are interested in this. It's good sort of dashboard. I hope that we can publicize it once we put it online. I think it absolutely should be online and maybe highlighted right on the homepage when it comes out, each time it comes out.
Thank you.
Very good. I think that'd probably be consensus in everyone. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Manager. We appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Next year, $64 million in development. This time I'm going to end the workshop. We're going to take a 10-minute break, then our regular scheduled council meeting will start at 7 o'clock.